There are moments in galactic history when even the Force recoils from what mortals attempt. This was one of them. Deep beneath the dead sands of Korriban, two insignificant Sith acolytes sought not glory, not knowledge, but theft. They meant to tear power from the soul of Ajunta Pall himself, the exiled warlord who had become the first Dark Lord of the Sith. But when their ritual began, they did not simply awaken a king of shadows. They opened a wound in the Force so deep that both Jedi prophecy and Sith doctrine failed to name what emerged from it. Few in the Republic understood how much of Sith history had been built on hunger. Not merely the hunger for conquest, but the older hunger, the one beneath all ambition, the desire to outlive death itself. The lords of Korriban had long taught that power did not end with the body. A spirit could linger, a will could imprint itself upon tomb, blade, bloodline, and world. That belief had transformed the Valley of the Dark Lords into something more than a graveyard. It was a kingdom of unfinished voices. Ajunta Pall was the oldest and most terrible of those voices. Before the Sith Empire, before Korriban was a world of pilgrimage for dark adepts, Ajunta Pall had been one of the fallen Jedi who defied the Order, embraced forbidden teachings, and led the Dark Exiles into the unknown. On red and ancient Korriban, he conquered the native Sith and bound their mysticism to his own brutality. His name became the first great echo in a lineage of darkness. Centuries passed, empires rose and crumbled, yet the tomb of Ajunta Pall remained feared even by those who called themselves heirs to his legacy. Some said his spirit had repented in death. Others whispered repentance was itself a trick, a final deception to lure the weak into lowering their guard. But all agreed on one truth: his soul had not vanished. It was this truth that drew two low-ranking Sith to him. They were not famous. No council historian ever intended to record their names. One was called Veyr, a gaunt overseer's apprentice with an uncommon gift for hearing the emotions trapped in old objects. The other was Malek, a failed duelist whose body lacked brilliance, but whose mind clung to forbidden texts like a starving man to crumbs. They were not rivals at first, they were survivors. Both had learned the same lesson within the Sith academies: talent attracted predators, so to rise openly was to die young. So they became forgettable. They bowed when insulted, they accepted low assignments, they memorized what their betters ignored. And in hidden archives beneath the academy on Korriban, they found references to a ritual older than the Empire itself. It did not summon a spirit, it bound a spirit into instability, creating a brief moment in which essence, memory, and accumulated power could be stolen like fire from an ancient furnace. The text named the act heretical even by Sith standards. That warning convinced them it was real. What they needed was impossible by ordinary means: a map of resonance chambers beneath Ajunta Pall's tomb, blood from a living descendant of the Sith species, iron dust forged from a Mandalorian basilisk war harness, and a shard of crystal touched by both Jedi serenity and Sith rage. To any sane mind, the list sounded like ritual madness. To Veyr and Malek, it sounded like destiny. They swore a pact in secret. They would remain beneath notice until every component was gathered. Then, on a night when Korriban's moons cast no visible light into the valley, they would descend into Ajunta Pall's resting place and steal what no Sith Lord had dared touch. Neither trusted the other. Both planned betrayal. But greed makes allies of cowards for a time. The first sign that the Force opposed them came in dreams.
There saw a throne made of bone floating above an endless black sea. Upon it sat a figure in shattered war armor, its face hidden by a veil of ash. Around the throne circled stars that bled like wounds. One by one they fell into the sea, and every time one vanished, he heard a name spoken in a language older than the Republic. Malek's visions were different. He stood in the Valley of the Dark Lords when every tomb opened at once. The dead emerged silently, not as specters, but as hollow silhouettes cut from starlight. They walked past him toward the northern horizon, where Korriban's mountains split apart to reveal an eye wider than a city. When the eye opened, he did not feel fear. He felt recognition, as though something within the Force had finally noticed him. Both awoke believing the same lie, that these visions were invitations. Their search for the ritual components took them beyond Korriban. To obtain the Sith blood, they traveled under false orders to Zeost, where ancient noble lines still preserved diluted traces of the old Sith species in secret genealogies. There they bribed a funerary keeper to allow them into catacombs beneath a ruined palace. In that frozen undercity, they found crystal coffins stacked like altars, each containing the remnants of dead houses who had once served forgotten kings. There sliced a finger from a mummified corpse, while Malek copied inscriptions from the walls, only to discover that the dead noble's sarcophagus bore the same symbol from their shared visions, a ring of broken stars around an empty center. The second component led them to a world almost erased from modern maps. Far beyond the main hyperlanes, hidden within nebula-burned sectors where navigation beacons failed, lay the grave plain of Rekshar, a dead Mandalorian colony from the age before the Neo-Crusaders. Legends claimed its warriors had turned from conquest to worship, carving their armor symbols not of clan or campaign, but of celestial beings they encountered during wars in the deep galactic rim. There, among black stones and rusting iron monoliths, Veyr and Malek found the skeleton of a basilisk war droid half buried in crimson dust. Its frame had fused with the armor of its rider long ago, machine and Mandalorian devouring each other in death. The helm still faced the sky. Malek pried plates loose while Veyr searched the grave tomb circle around the corpse. He found carvings unlike anything in Sith records. 4 giant figures towered over kneeling warriors. One had many eyes. One held a spear of light. One wore a mask split between fury and grief. The last had no face at all, only an empty halo. Ancient Mandalorians, it seemed, had once knelt before entities beyond mere Force ghosts. At that moment in galactic history, neither Sith understood what they were seeing, but the Force did. When night came to Rekshar, the stars above the grave plain dimmed all at once. A wind moved across the dunes, though the air had been lifeless for centuries. The half-buried basilisk groaned as if remembering war. Then shapes appeared at the edge of their campfire, towering warriors in archaic armor, their capes rigid as stone, their helmets horned and inhuman. Ancient Mandalorians. Not living beings, not simple spirits, echoes bound to the place by oath and slaughter. One stepped forward. Its voice sounded like metal dragged over stone. "You seek iron, but iron remembers its masters." Malek ignited his saber in panic. Veyr fell to one knee, not in reverence, but because the pressure in the air forced him down. Behind the spectral Mandalorians, the dunes shifted, and for an instant he saw colossal forms moving beneath the sand, as if buried gods rolled in uneasy sleep. The lead spectre raised a ghostly spear toward them. "Take what you came for, but know this. The king you wake was chained for more than his own sins." Then the spectres vanished, the fire died, the stars returned. Veyr wanted to leave at once. Malek insisted the warning proved they were close to greatness. They took the iron dust and fled with their certainty cracked but not broken. The final component proved hardest to obtain, a crystal touched by both Jedi serenity and Sith rage. It could not be synthetic. It could not be looted from a battlefield. It had to embody contradiction. Their search drove them to the forgotten moon of Lenico IV, where a collapsed shrine once served as neutral ground for mystics long before the Jedi codified doctrine or the Sith forged empires. The shrine stood above a sea of silver reeds that whispered even when there was no wind. Its central chamber held no statue, only a basin filled with perfectly still water. Suspended above that water by no visible mechanism was a fractured crystal the color of dawn through smoke. As Veyr approached, he felt calm unlike anything he had known. His thoughts
His fear loosened. Malek felt the opposite. His anger surged so violently he nearly struck the crystal with his saber. Yet when both stood beneath it, the crystal brightened, recognizing in them the collision of hunger and hesitation. Neither noticed they were being watched. From the shrine's upper archway emerged a robed figure carrying no weapon. Its face was hidden beneath a white mask marked by a single vertical line. It spoke in a voice neither male nor female. "That crystal is not a prize." Malek spun, saber raised. "Stand aside." The figure did not move. It was formed where opposing currents of the Force met and failed to destroy one another. Take it, and you disturb a balance older than your orders and stronger than your ambitions. Veyr, for the first time, hesitated openly. "Who are you?" The masked figure answered, "A witness." Then the chamber changed. The pool beneath the crystal darkened into a star field. The shrine walls dissolved. Veyr saw worlds he had never visited, oceans suspended upside down, cities built inside skeletons larger than mountains, temples drifting between moons. Malek saw armies marching into light and never returning. Above them both towered 4 immense presences, the same forms carved on Rekshar: the many-eyed Watcher, the Spear-bearer, the Weeping Mask, and the Hollow Crown. Gods, or things ancient cultures had mistaken for gods. Their attention fell upon the 2 Sith for a single impossible second. Veyr collapsed, vomiting blood. Malek screamed and slashed through empty air. The vision ended. The shrine returned. The masked witness was gone. The crystal hung lower than before, now within reach. Malek seized it. The basin shattered. Across Lenico IV, the silver reeds bent flat as though a storm had passed over them, yet no wind blew. Somewhere in the deeper currents of the Force, something had awoken. They returned to Korriban, changed. Veyr no longer trusted his own thoughts. At the edge of hearing, he sensed whispers in empty corridors and grief in ancient stone. Malek had become feverishly certain that destiny favored him. He spoke less, he smiled more. The crystal shard never left his robes, and at night it glowed with alternating pulses of pale gold and violent crimson. The appointed night arrived beneath a sky without moons. They entered Ajunta Pall's tomb through a secondary shaft accessible only by a collapsed gallery known in old maps as the Hall of Exile's Breath. There, beneath carvings worn almost featureless by time, they found the resonance chambers described in their stolen text. 7 circular vaults surrounded the inner sarcophagus room like organs around a heart. Each amplified memory, suffering, triumph, or hate.
Together they created a spiritual lattice strong enough to anchor a dead will. The ritual began with blood. Veyr traced old Sith runes across the floor, using the Zeost blood mixed with basilisk iron dust. Malek set the crystal shard into a bronze cradle at the chamber center. Around Ajunta Pall's stone sarcophagus, they placed relics taken from the tomb's lesser alcoves: a broken sword ring, a fragment of ceremonial armor, a crown spike blackened by age, and a bowl containing ashes that no historian had dared to identify. As they chanted from the forbidden text, the tomb answered. First came temperature. The air grew so cold that the runes steamed. Then sound. Deep within the walls, something like distant drums began to pulse. Veyr recognized it with horror. Not drums, but a heartbeat too large to belong to any body. The sarcophagus lid trembled. At once, Veyr knew they were not opening a grave, they were opening a threshold. Malek cut his palm and poured blood onto the crystal. It flared red. Veyr spoke the next line, and the chamber darkened until only the runes remained visible. Out of that darkness rose a shape, first as smoke, then as armor, then as a towering spectral figure crowned in shadow. Ajunta Pall. His eyes were coal sunk in the skull of a king. His armor bore designs from the earliest Sith warforges, and his presence pressed on the mind like the weight of a buried world. He looked not angry, not confused, but profoundly tired. "So," he said, his voice carrying the dust of millennia, "the children of my ruin have come to feed." Malek, trembling with triumph, activated the second stage of the ritual. Chains of red light erupted from the chamber floor and wrapped around Ajunta Pall's spectral limbs. The text had promised that in this moment his essence would destabilize, allowing them to drain his power. Instead, Ajunta Pall laughed. The sound cracked stone. "Fools, did you think I remained because I was trapped?" Then the true ritual began, not theirs, but his. The runes they had drawn twisted beneath their feet. Symbols changed shape. The blood ignited with black flame. From every wall of the tomb came voices, hundreds of them, old Sith chanting in tones too ancient for modern tongues. The resonance chambers awakened fully, and Veyr suddenly understood the deception. The forbidden text was not instructions for theft, it was bait, designed long ago to bring ambitious Sith into precise alignment within the tomb. They had not bound Ajunta Pall, they had completed the mechanism that bound something far older behind him. The chamber split open above the sarcophagus, revealing not rock, but a vast abyss filled with moving stars. In that void hung the outline of a colossal crown with no head beneath it. The faceless halo from Rekshar, the final god form from Lenico IV, the hollow crown. Ajunta Pall turned toward it with hatred deeper than death. "This," he said, "is what we found beyond exile. This is what crowned our conquest. This is what devoured the first empire of the dark." Malek refused to listen. Blinded by terror and greed, he thrust both hands toward Ajunta Pall and tore at his essence with the force. For a heartbeat it worked. Streams of crimson power ripped from the ancient lord and flowed into him. His body arched, his veins burned like lava beneath skin. Then the hollow crown looked back. Malek stopped screaming because his mouth forgot how. His shadow peeled away from his feet and rose behind him, growing larger, taller, less human. His eyes became black mirrors reflecting starless space. When he spoke, 3 voices emerged at once. His own, Ajunta Pall's echo, and a third, vast silence pretending to be sound. Veyr stumbled backward. Something had entered the ritual that was neither Sith spirit nor ordinary Force entity. Not a ghost, not a god. A vacancy with will. Ajunta Pall roared and tore free of the light chains by sheer force of ancient rage. He seized Malek's half-consumed form by the throat and drove him into the chamber floor. The tomb shook. Across Korriban, crypt split and old wards ignited. In the academy above, acolytes fell to their knees as a pressure wave of dark and light swept through the valley. There saw visions not meant for mortal minds. He saw the first dark exiles kneeling before a starless gate. He saw ancient Mandalorians battling impossible beings in void-lit deserts beyond known space. He saw Jedi seers on Titan collapsing in tears as a hole briefly opened in the living Force. He saw entities watching from realms between worlds, curious for the first time in ages. Then he saw what must be done. The crystal. It was not a key for theft. It was a hinge between opposed currents. If shattered at the point of convergence, it might sever the opening before the hollow crown fully crossed into reality. But what happened next would change everything, because the one who understood the solution was the least powerful Sith in the chamber. Veyr lunged for the crystal cradle as Malek, half-consumed, rose again with impossible strength. Ajunta Pall intercepted him, but each blow between them sent fractures through the tomb and shockwaves through the Force itself. Ghosts began emerging from surrounding crypts, not only Sith, but fragments of beings from eras forgotten. Ancient war beasts of pure memory stomped through stone. Screaming faces appeared in the air and dissolved into red
mist. The tomb was no longer a tomb. It had become a crossroads. Veyr reached the crystal and touched it. Instantly he saw the masked witness from Lenico 4 standing before him once more. "Balance is not peace," the witness said. "It is containment." Veyr understood. Some powers were never meant to be mastered, only kept from contact. Behind him, Malek hurled Ajunta Pall into a pillar. The ancient lord crashed to one knee, armor cracking, spirit fire spilling from the wounds. For the first time, Veyr saw not merely a tyrant of old, but a prisoner who had spent centuries standing guard over the threshold he once helped open. Ajunta Pall looked at him. "Break it," he commanded. Veyr hesitated. What will happen? Ajunta Pall's expression became something almost like sorrow. "You will survive the least." Veyr lifted the crystal, and in that final instant before it fell, the hollow crown descended further through the wound in reality, and all across the galaxy, beings sensitive to the Force looked up in dread at something they could not name. Thus ended the first movement of the forbidden ritual, not with triumph, but with revelation. Two minor Sith had sought to steal the soul of Ajunta Pall, and in doing so uncovered a terror hidden beneath the oldest foundations of Sith history. The first Dark Lord had not simply haunted Korriban out of pride or punishment. He had remained because some burden had chained him to vigilance. Few in the Republic understood it then, fewer among the Sith, but a turbulence had entered the Force unlike anything known to either tradition. It was not the dark side rising, it was not the light pushing back, it was the barrier between opposites weakening under pressure from something that fed on division itself. On Titan, seers would soon report dreams of faceless crowns and bleeding constellations. On worlds long forgotten by the main galactic lanes, old shrines would begin to awaken. Among Mandalorian relic clans, dormant myths of the sky-buried gods would stir once more.
And on Korriban, beneath collapsing stone and the roar of clashing spirits, there Sadov prepared to decide whether the galaxy would inherit a wound or a doorway. Because when the crystal shattered, Ajunta Pall would not be the only ancient power set loose. What emerged from the broken threshold would force Jedi, Sith, and worlds beyond either order to confront a truth buried since the first age of exile. And the second part of this story begins with the sound of that crystal breaking.
If you enjoyed this journey into the ancient history of the galaxy, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Many more legends from the Old Republic are still waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe and continue exploring the hidden stories of the Force.